I'd like to talk a bit about the manifesto and in the context of Venezuela. Venezuela was the country that was most colonized by the United States and its corporations during the 20th century because of its oil, of course. And your opening statement is what Marx and Engels said, that the ruling class, unable to secure working people their existence, is unfit any longer to be the ruling class and impose its conditions. Well, this is exactly what happened in Venezuela. Venezuela has been a microcosm of some of these historical processes that this manifesto very clearly writes about. But for 20 years of the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela, it has been in part a response to these plutocratic elites' callousness, indifference, rapacious behavior that left the population in dire poverty. A rich nation such as Venezuela, they will never return to power. I can safely say that, because they threw their lot with the oppressors, fully backing the outrages of the United States and allies that visited upon them so much suffering. And Venezuela has been a nation that has defied them in asserting its independence, its sovereignty, and its road to socialism. This is the example that the United States and the corporations and allies will not accept, that in the Western Hemisphere, there should be a country that says no to capitalism. And of course, we are following in the steps of the Cuban Revolution. But Cuba and Venezuela are really the type of socialism that you should really focus on, especially when you see what their socialism means in the 21st century, because it means that there has been a process of change within them. Venezuela is a shining example of what socialism can accomplish, even though there's a vile economic, mediatic, diplomatic, political war waged against it by the United States and Canada and its allies. What does this mean for the rest of the world, for the rest of the nations? Well, there is supposedly a rules-based international infrastructure, all these international organizations, and the international order, all these institutions, you can see in how they have treated Venezuela, have been demonstrated to be a sham, a vile tool of oppression and thievery, a facade to further dominate nations that dare to say that they are sovereign, that they're not puppets of the US and corporate capitalism. The malign attacks against Venezuela, I'm sure you know, it's been paramilitary attacks, mercenary attacks, attacks with criminal gangs, the robbing of its corporations, of its assets, encouraging a false government, supporting coups, openly funding anti-democratic, violent opposition. But I have been very often disappointed by many on the left, many supposed progressives, socialist parties, and groups that should know better in the world, for their lack of support for the Bolivarian Revolution, specifically those in North America and Europe. It should have been a visceral, a passionate, a full support of the Bolivarian Revolution. Remember the Spanish Republic of 1936 and 39. If the democracies and socialists of the world had more fully defended the Republic, the Nazis would not have been so emboldened in attacking the rest of Europe, and who knows how world history could have been. Now, why this lukewarm attitude towards Venezuela? Why? I think it has been because the rigid ideas of what is socialism, by their unaccepting of diversity, of the pluralism that Hugo Chavez spoke about, and quite frankly, because of their ignorance of Marx's essential work that indicated that revolutions are not born out of a book, but out of the class struggle of societies with their own idiosyncrasies and their own circumstances. Marx's view was a dynamic view that pointed out, unlike other theorists, exactly how change occurs. the Bolivarian revolution is quintessentially Venezuelan without stopping also being socialist. As Engels said, socialism is not written in stone, but is in a process of constant change and transformation. And that should be front and center here. What is the socialism now of the 21st century, particularly of the transformations in Cuba and in Venezuela? Venezuelan socialism is robust. It has displaced private capital from political power, and there lies the venom with which the powerful elites have reacted against the Bolivarian government. And it is squarely set on human rights, on sovereignty, on democracy, on its constitution, on the distribution of wealth. No wonder there's no anomie, no social despair, no random violence, no shooting like in the United States, no social disintegration or delegitimization of the institutions in Venezuela. And the USA, Canada, and the OAS and the EU's attempt to create a puppet alternative with the opposition outside the country utterly failed. So this is the question. After all the empire, this imperialist nations have thrown against Venezuela, how come Venezuela is still there, still strong? It's even stronger than ever. It's socialism. And with the current peace negotiations with the opposition parties in Mexico that's taking place right now, you can see the utter and total triumph of President Maduro has had by holding this. So, and another great triumph of Venezuelan socialism has been how it has treated the pandemic. Even when vaccines have been withheld from Venezuela, COVAX doesn't want to give us either the money that we gave them or the vaccines, but Venezuela is a country with the highest daily COVID vaccination rate with respect to its population. It exceeds, on average, the vaccination per population rates of Western nations that have greater access to vaccine, like Canada, US, Germany, the UK. 33% of its population is vaccinated thanks to the vaccines that have come from China, that have come from Russia, that have come from Cuba. If we get these vaccines that have been stopped, by December, we'll have 70% of the population vaccinated. And Venezuela and Cuba have one of the lowest COVID cases and death cases in the region. So what is most important? It's international solidarity, especially South-South. This is what's needed, not globalization or universalism, but international solidarity, which has always been at the heart of socialism, at the heart of Christianity, at the heart of sheer humanism. Cuba, China, Russia, Maria. Iran, Turkey, Maria, Nicaragua, they've all shown tremendous solidarity to Venezuela. So to end, I want to say that the most creative, most democratic, most significant struggle for socialism in the world today is in Venezuela. And it should have a more vigorous and important solidarity and support from others, because if Venezuela falls, so falls the region, and heaven knows what will happen in the world. I don't think it will fall. It is the domino that will not fall. Thank you.